Hello, Dr. Kedar. It's wonderful to have you. It's the first series of having interviews about what's going on in Israel today and what's the reason that these are going on. Obviously, you're at the aftermath of October the 7th, when Israel came under attack. And there are many, obviously, views of how we can explain why this happened. Obviously, there are some people who say these are freedom fighters, some people who say they are terrorists, and this was a savagery act that happened in Israel, in the southern Israel. You are an Israeli scholar. You have been covering the Israeli-Arab conflict for decades now. You have given many lectures and have been interviewed by many different agencies and news agencies as well. I wanted to take you back because, as we all know, the conflict did not start on October the 7th, even though it was probably the worst attack on Israeli land and on Israeli people after the Holocaust. So I would like to just go back maybe to the time of the Ottomans, maybe even before that, to the time of the Mamluks, and see who were the people who were living in that land, in Palestine, the region of Palestine, north and south of it, which was different Arab nations. Now, I don't know how these nations were created, if there were separate nations. There were the tribal nations that you and I have discussed in past. And I wanted to get your idea about how these things began.
Well, the main source of attitude of Muslims to Jews actually is already the Prophet Muhammad, who lived in the 7th century, and the way in which he treated the Jews of the Arab Peninsula is actually I would say, the most important example for Muslims until this very day, how to treat the Jews in Israel. It's not from the times of the Mamluks, which we talked about the regime which ended in 1517, and later the Ottomans, but I'm talking about the 7th century already, which is like 700 years before the Ottomans. We have always to carry in mind that the mere existence of Judaism is a problem in the eyes of Muslims. And this is some kind of a result of the fact that even the people of Mecca, who heard Muhammad preaching to them, when they hear the stories which he tells them from the Bible, actually, because he learned about the Judaism from Ka'b, a Yemenite Jew who lived in his home. And they heard the Quran, which talks about Adam and Eve in paradise, about God who created the world in 7 days, and they heard about Noah and the ark, and they heard from him about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and the 2 wives of Abraham, Sarah and Hajar, and Ishmael. And they heard all the stories about Joseph and his brothers, how they sold him and so forth. So the people of Mecca actually made fun out of Muhammad and accused him that all he's doing is plagiarizing the Jewish sources. Asatir al-awwalin, as they call it in Arabic, the fables of the former ones, means the Jews. Means that Judaism was actually the mother of Islam, which Islam, since its beginning, tries to show that it is an independent religion not connected to Judaism. But the resemblance between Judaism and And Islam, actually, what is the, I would say, the biggest threat on the originality of Islam, if I could say it in English. And this is the problem, because those people in Mecca were making fun out of Muhammad, who actually is copy and paste materials from Judaism. This is why he felt that, first of all, he has to detach himself from Judaism. Secondly, to detach himself from Jews means to be mean to them. And actually, he slaughtered hundreds of Jews in Medina and in Khaybar, in an oasis near Medina, which is called Khaybar. And until this very day, and this is the relevance, until this very day, Arabs here, and I hear it, you can hear it on YouTube as well, how they chant Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, Jaish Muhammad Sayaud, means in Arabic, Khaybar, Khaybar, oh Jews, the army of Muhammad will come back. Means in order to do to you what he did to you in those days. Means that the attitude of Muhammad to Jews is actually the role model for Muslims today. The charter of Hamas is replete with verses from the Quran and parts from the Hadith.
Right. We don't want to. I don't want to get to Hamas yet, because that's something that was created much later.
What I'm saying is that the attitude of Muslims in general to Jews were from the beginning influenced heavily by the attitude of Muhammad and his companions, the Sahaba, to the Jews of the Arab Peninsula in his days. And this is what we all have to carry in mind, because after Muhammad, when they started to need the Jews as doctors, as translators, as merchants, as accountants, they actually treated Jews in a better way under the Jose Umar, the contract of Umar, which actually arranged life of Jews and Christians in the Islamic State as dhimmis, people who live under the auspice of Islam. They are not allowed to ride a horse, only a donkey, in order to denigrate them. They have to carry a yellow patch. This is not a Nazi invention. This was invented in Baghdad of the 9th century. Christians, by the way, had to carry a purple patch to define them. Okay? The Nazis learned it from the Islamic tradition.
So let's go back. I just want to go and try to really concentrate. I mean, that's an amazing story, to the history to know how Islam began and the influence of Islam on that region. I just would like to know what happened in the Ottomans. How were the country, or at that time the Ottoman Empire, divided into different regions? Was it tribal, or was it based on the Ottomans' understanding of how it should be divided? The regions were given names, obviously. Who were the people who lived in the Ottoman Empire?
What characterizes the Ottoman time in the land of Israel, which started in 1517 and ended in 1917, exactly 400 years, and formerly the Mamluk time as well, and formerly the Ayyubis and others. What characterized the life in the land of Israel is that the government was not a local government. It was always a province of another powerful state, which was far from Eretz Israel. In the days of the Mamluks, the center was in Egypt. the Cairo. In the days of the Ottomans, which succeeded them, the center was in Istanbul, in today's Turkey. And the land of Israel was actually a margin of the kingdom, which the center usually didn't care much about what happens. So all kinds of others could come and dwell here in the land, like Uzbeks, like Kurds, like Arabs, of course, who wandered in the region, but many other ethnic groups which could come and go whenever they liked, because there was never a central government in Eretz Israel. There was never an army to protect the people from invaders who came from far and from near and far. And since it was a marginal area for both Cairo and Istanbul, therefore, all kinds of warlords invaded the country with their armies, Mongols and Berbers and all kinds of others, also from Africa, yes, who came once in a while. And they were looking for a fertile country to live in, because North Africa is a desert. So many groups which wandered in the space of the Middle East, found the place of Eretz Israel, because it's a fertile country. You have water, you have the Jordan River, you have the many rivers in the Yarkon, and you have the Kinneret, the lake. So since this country, and Lebanon as well, was very fertile through the centuries, many remnants of all kinds of nations found asylum and found place in order to sit here, because the central governments never cared about this place. And this actually what made the people here in Israel, the Arab people who live today in Israel, if you check their genetic sources, you can find that they are from all over Western Asia, even Europeans. You know, we have a family here in Kfar Manda, in north, near Haifa, an Arab family, which is called Bushnak. Bushnak means somebody who comes from Bosnia. And Bosnia is in what Yugoslavia was, in the Balkans. Okay? So they, and the names of the people who live here, the Arabs, testify about their origin. First of all, they have Cherkessim, Circassians, who came from the Balkan, from the Caucasus. Many Arabs are named El Hijazi. Hijazi means somebody who came from the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia. Some of them are named El Masri. And Masarwa means Egyptian or Egyptians. Halabi from Aleppo, northern Syria. Horani from the Horan in southern Syria. Sidawi is from Sidon in Lebanon. Sorani is from Tzor, means Tyre, in Lebanon as well. And so many names of people who came from far and from near and far are starring here within the Arab sector in Israel and in what's called so-called Palestine. So genetics and the names actually testify that there was not an original Palestinian nation ever. It is a mixture of all kinds of peoples who lived even in Europe and even in Asia, Southern Asia, and in the Caucasus, Armenians and Uzbeks and Kazakhs and Kurds. There is a big family in Jerusalem named Al-Kurd. Kurd means somebody who's Kurdish, came from northern Iraq. So, and this is actually the result of the fact that here in this country, there was never a central government which controlled the country from the country, from the country and for the country. It was always
State. It was a state or a region that was governed by a foreign country.
a far away region from the centers, and therefore the centers, whether in Cairo or in Istanbul, more or less couldn't care less, only as long as the people pay taxes and they don't arrange any rebellion against the government. That's all was what was they were interested in this country. And
let me just ask you this. When during the 1917, when the Ottoman Empire almost came to an end, I think it was the Brits and the French that decided to divide up the entire land from north to south. And I don't know, I try to look, everything looks, when you look at books, you read books and you watch all these documentaries, it seems like they decided to divide up these lands based on just their own benefit. It didn't seem like that they're doing it for any rhyme or reason. There was, I don't know if it was based on a tribal or national, because afterwards we had Iraq and we had Jordan, we had Egypt. I mean, Egypt was there anyway, but we had Lebanon. How did they divide? How did they come up with the proper borders? Was it just haphazardly, or was it a tribal region that lived there?
No.
Being governed by some kind of a tribal leader. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, the land was occupied by the British Army in the First World War. And the northern parts, like what today Lebanon and Syria, were occupied by France.
Right.
And this was, first of all, how these countries fell into the hands of Europe in the First World War. Sykes, the British minister, and Picot, the French one, actually had an agreement, a secret agreement, in 1916 to divide the Middle East according to their interests. And in this issue, the Middle East is not different from many areas in the world, where the Europeans actually divided the world according to their interests. They divided the New World, what today America is. They divided between them Africa. Some countries were run by France, some countries were run by Britain, some countries were by Italy, and so forth. And Eastern Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, all these places also were governed by the colonialism of the Europeans. And the colonies were, first of all, a source of income. They were looting, actually, the treasures from the colonies in Africa, in the Middle East, in Eastern Asia, in America as well. They stole diamonds and gold and whatever they could find in the earth. They stole the people and turned them into slaves. The Afro-Americans today in America are the descendants of slaves, which were brought by the Westerners, by the white people, by the Europeans, to work, which is another kind of treasure. So they didn't really care about the populations in these countries which they occupied. All they cared of was what they can steal from the ground of the lands, and if they can steal the people as well, to serve them as servants and slaves, it's also a
that
very
we know.
good way.
But how did Sykes and Picot came up with the division of the land in 1916? I mean, what was it? I know that they wanted to have the northern part to France and the southern part to Brits. I want to know how they came up with it.
Look, it's all matter of influence. And when saying Arabic, shufuni anas, look at me, how big my country is, how influential we are, and dividing lands was also was derived from this point as well. The British, I would say, had more brains than the French because they took the southern part of the Middle East while the French took the northern one. The southern one actually includes the oil.
Right.
In Iraq, in southern Iran, what today Iran, in Saudi Arabia, of course. And the British preferred to take this part. And don't forget that the first oil well, which started to feed the world with energy, was found in 1900. Means the beginning of the 20th century. So when they divided the Middle East in 1916, the British were already aware of the benefits of controlling Iraq and the Gulf, because these areas were full of gas until this very day. Whoever is there is a very rich person. So this is what happened in the Middle East. The British nominated kings and rulers according to their idea, to their.
But it wasn't based on tribal, regional, that it was divided.
Excuse me?
Meaning when they divided Syria and Lebanon, the border between Syria and Lebanon was decided by.
Well, in the beginning, Lebanon was planned to be part of Syria, as it was for long history. Lebanon
because
was
they
only
had more Christians, right?
Right. Lebanon was only a district, should have been only a district in Greater Syria. However, in the First World War, there was a big massacre against the Armenians and the Assyrians, who are Christians, and the Ottomans suspected that they actually are collaborating with the British and the French. So they slaughtered some 1.5 million Christians, mostly Armenians, but also Assyrians. And the Christians of Lebanon, when they were, exposed to the fact that the French actually are planning a new state for the region, they approached the French and asked them not to be included in Greater Syria, because Greater Syria will have a Muslim majority. And since they saw what Muslims are doing to Christians in this massacre, and it was, everybody then knew what happened with the Armenians. So the French actually agreed to give the Lebanese a state for themselves. And this is what Lebanon is today, a separate state from Syria, because of this. Now, don't forget that the majority of the Christians in Lebanon are the Maronites. They are a tribe, the name Maronites. And the Maronites are Catholic. They are connected to the Vatican. And the French also are Catholic. So this proximity between the French and the Maronites in Lebanon actually helped them, approach the French and get their independence. Now, as a result, the president of Lebanon is always a Maronite Christian. And this is a position which belongs to this sect or to this community, because this is a tradition which was made by the French already when Lebanon started its way towards independence. Lebanon got its independence in 1943, 5 years before Israel and before the mandate finished, because the Vichy government in France was not interested in holding Lebanon anymore, and they left Syria and Lebanon in order to take care of France, which was under Nazi occupation and the Vichy government. So, while the British remained in Eretz Israel and controlled this region until mid-May of 1948, means 5 years later.
Right. So I want to stop you there. I don't want to get to that in this session. I think we're going to do Israel and the independence in 1947 later. I just want to very quickly, maybe in the next minute or two, the division between what was Transjordan and Iraq. How did that happen? How was that decision? I know that Brits were very much interested into Iraq and the oil that it had to offer. So how did they come up with the division, with the lines? Was it any rhyme or reason, or was it again just a decision made?
Iraq was designed mainly in order to serve the British greed to oil. Iraq was established, I would even say, in order to drench the British with oil. This is it's shameful to say it, but the Sykes actually wrote a book about his service for the Queen. And he wrote a magnificent book about how the borders of the Middle East were marked. I highly recommend this book. He exposes all the dirty, disgusting considerations of the British Empire when it came to the lands which it acquired by war and controlled in order to benefit from these countries. And you know, when you read these things today, you tear your hair off, because it is so not politically correct what he did. But you know, you cannot judge one era with a criteria of another era. So to say, but he actually exposes. He actually wrote this book in order to show how good servant he was to Her Majesty. Okay, but it actually shows what were the considerations: oil and oil and oil and money. And they couldn't care less about the people. They couldn't care less about even if they kill each other, let them kill each other. The world will have less problems if Arabs will kill each other. This is more or less how they treated them and how they related to them.
So, Dr. Kedar, I want to thank you. Really, I know it's very late there. I really appreciate your insight. I would like to meet again in a very near future to discuss the Balfour Declaration, how that came about, and how it took us to the United Nations Resolution of 181, what happened after that, and how we ended up being where we are today. Again, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.